Okay, in the previous episode, we looked at the features of a standard CDS contract. We also saw that CDS are, in general, still quoted in the market in terms of spreads, and that spread can either be more or less than the standard premium on the contract. We saw the example of Glencore, where in early 2015, after the crash in metal prices, the 5-year CDS of Glencore spiked up and at one point was trading as wide as 757 basis points. Yet, it carried a fixed premium or coupon of only 500 basis points. And this means the buyer of Glencore CDS will need to compensate the seller for this difference of 257 basis points by paying an upfront fee when she buys the CDS. All of this we discussed in the last part of our series. What we will now do is, we will look at the fundamentals behind calculating this fee. If we could go back to the old times, that is before the era of fixed premium, then the buyer would have had to pay 757 basis points every year for the remaining life of the CDS. But, as things stand today, she's only paying 500 basis points. Now that means we need to find out what this difference is worth for a given notional amount over the life of the contract. Finally, we need to discount the difference back to its present value. Upfront premium therefore would equal to the present value of the CDS spread minus the present value of the fixed coupons times the notional amount on the CDS. So this part is pretty straightforward. What is not so straightforward, however, is the computation of the discount rate. And that is because the discount rate has to consider the probability of default of the reference entity. Remember, in part 1 we said that when you buy the bonds of a company, there is a chance that you're not going to get back your money. Likewise, when you buy a CDS, there is a chance that the reference entity will default while the CDS is still outstanding. Now that probability of default can be high or it can be low, but it will still be a positive number. In other words, there will always be a chance of a default associated with the reference entity when you are buying a CDS. But why is it so important? Because if the reference entity defaults before the maturity of the CDS, then the buyer does not need to pay the premium anymore. The CDS is triggered and it's now the seller who has to pay the notional amount to the buyer. But in reality, we know that the seller actually pays the notional amount minus any recovery value of the bond. Why is that so? Because the bonds are auctioned when there is a default. And as we said earlier, the bonds still have some value even though they are in default. This value goes to the CDS seller because after a credit event, it's the seller who gets to keep the bonds. So the seller ends up paying the notional amount net of the recovery value. What we've seen in the first part of the series, right? So now, coming back to our discount rate, it'll have to incorporate these two things. One is the probability of default of the reference entity, and two is the recovery value. Now the recovery value can also be looked at what is left after you deduct the loss given default from the original value of the bonds. If you look at it intuitively, a higher probability of default means a lower chance of paying that difference over the entire remaining life of the CDS. Therefore, a higher probability of default means a lower upfront fee. You can also look at it mathematically. A higher default probability means a lower expected value, which again means a lower upfront fee. But what happens to recovery value in this calculation? That's pretty simple, right? A higher recovery value means a lower upfront fee and vice versa. Now, fortunately, market participants do not need to rack their brains over this upfront fee because calculation of this upfront fee is also standardized today. It is calculated by the ISDA standard CDS model, and you can find it here at this link. ISDA stands for International Swaps and Derivatives Association. It's the governing body of the swaps and derivatives market, including the CDS market. So the buyers and sellers of CDS basically agree that they will obey the rules and norms laid down by ISDA. So it's the ISDA standard CDS model which calculates the upfront fee for the difference between quoted spread and premium. This ensures there is no confusion or ambiguity between market participants as far as the upfront fee is concerned. Whenever two parties enter into a trade, they simply exchange the amount that the ISDA calculator throws up.